Welcome to this week's Foundation Friday. I am joined today by Todd Buzard, Senior Vice President of Finance for First American Equipment Finance. Thanks for joining me, Todd.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
No, I was excited last week to meet you for the first time, even though you're in upstate New York, like
Yes.
close to where I grew up. So I was excited to meet you and excited to learn more about Tour de Cure for the American Diabetes Association.
Yeah, excited to tell you more.
So, Todd, do you mind just kind of giving a little background in regards to what is Tour de Cure?
Yeah, so the Tour de Cure is one of the largest fundraising events for the American Diabetes Association. The event's been around for about 30 years now, and the event involves primarily a bicycling event where riders get together. There's a number of routes, anything from like 12 to 15 miles all the way up to 100 miles. So whatever level of bicycler you are, you can get involved. And every year the event draws thousands of riders, hundreds of community members. And it's just a great community event in our area. Our event is called the Upstate New York Tour de Cure. Okay. There are different Tour de Cures all across the nation, but ours in particular tends to do very well and is really a great community event.
Perfect. How many people typically do you get to attend one of these?
So, during the pandemic, the last couple of years, it's been more of a virtual event. So I'll go back a few years to the last sort of physical event that we had. But I think we had thousands of participants in the Rochester area, many corporate supporters get involved. We've got a lot of corporate sponsors in the area. We get a lot of individuals who create friends and family teams. So it's a real shining star for our community, and it's a really great event that they put on every year.
And thank you for sharing that. So I guess, Todd, how did you get involved?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So I got involved about 5 years ago. And it really stemmed from my son, who was 8 years old at the time, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And from the day that he was diagnosed, the one thing my wife and I wanted to do for him was we wanted to create as much of a positive experience for him, because type 1 diabetes, at least at this point, it's a lifelong disease. There's not a cure. And so we wanted to rally some community support. We wanted him to be involved in something that was positive. And, we thought that the Tour de Cure was a great event to get involved in, as a family, to get my son involved in. So we started off as just, basically myself being a participant and being a rider. And, my son was only about 9 at the time, I think. So I wasn't sure about, him bicycling 15 or 20 miles. But it took about a year to figure out that he could actually ride further than I could, even at, age 10. So I think, my son and I did a 15-mile route together in our first Tour de Cure. And since then, we've done the 25-mile route a few times. And I know this year, I think my son is even thinking about us doing more like, the 40-mile route or even the 60-mile route. So essentially it all stems from my son and, our desire as a family to do something positive for him, but also give back to the community in a way that, benefits, people who are living with diabetes in general.
Thank you for sharing that. And so First American's involvement in this?
Yeah, First American's involvement has really been primarily over the last 3 years. So 2019 would have been our sort of first year as a company being involved in, during that year, we did very well. We received an award from the American Diabetes Association as the Rookie of the Year team during that year. And since then, both the company and the colleagues have supported Torticure. I think the last couple of years have been a little bit more challenging with it being a virtual event, but in 2022, the event is going back to an in-person event. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to having, First American and our great colleagues here get involved in a little bit more different way than we've been able to the last couple of years.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And what I'll do afterwards is First American actually has a web page for the Tour de Cure. I'll actually have that on the entry slide and exit slide too. So people, when you're watching this, go check out the great work that organization is doing, please.
Sounds great.
So when you're doing these rides, you're collecting donations, you're getting sponsor dollars. When people make a donation, Todd, where do those monies go?
Yeah, so the American Diabetes Association typically gives money, or puts money, or invests money into three different areas. So one would be just advocacy and public awareness. There's a lot of need out there for public awareness of diabetes, what it is, what it isn't. There's a lot of awareness out there needed within our government about the needs of diabetics. So there's a strong kind of investment in that area. The second part would just be education and information. There's, as I said, diabetes doesn't have a cure right now, especially type 1 diabetes, like what my son has. But there's a way to live with it in a way that allows you to live a pretty healthy life. But sometimes I think education is needed on how to take care of yourself, diet, exercise, different things like that. So there's money that goes into helping people that live with diabetes, how to do it well, so that you can avoid potential side effects of diabetes, which can be longer term in nature if you're not taking care of yourself. And then the last one would just be diabetes research. I can share a little bit about that. My son, when he was first diagnosed, multiple times a day, he would inject himself with a needle to whether he was pricking his finger to test his blood sugar level, he was giving himself a shot to give himself insulin. He was doing that multiple times a day, and sometimes it was 4 or 5 times a day.
At 8, 9 years old?
Yes, at 8. Matter of fact, when he went to the hospital at 8 years old, he was in the hospital for 2 hours before he gave himself his first injection, which is kind of crazy to watch your 8-year-old son do that.
I can't fathom that.
And of course, we had to learn to do it as a family as well. But
yeah,
that's where we came from. And a lot of people, when they get diagnosed with diabetes, that's kind of where they start, is pricking their finger manually, using just a regular needle. But my son now, now that he's 14, he doesn't do that anymore. He wears 2 things on his body. One is a insulin pump, and he also wears what's called a CGM, or a continuous glucose monitor. So he can literally look on his cell phone and he can see what his blood sugar level is at all times. My wife and I can also see what his level is, even though we're not with him. And he has devices that tell these wearable devices exactly how much insulin to deliver into his body, keep track of what his blood sugar level is. So he's not pricking himself with needles any longer. Um, he now just changes these devices every few days, and that's made a huge difference in quality of life for him, and also
Absolutely.
quality of life for our family. And so, when I look at putting money into research and investing money into research, these are the types of things that have come out of that.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine if that's where we are in the year 2022, where we can go with
Yeah.
additional monies for research. So that's kind of the last area that the American Diabetes Association invests money in. So, but I wanted to tell you a little bit more about that one because I feel like personally, like I've seen the benefit of that research hit home.
Absolutely. And, the initial conversation that we had last week in regards just the awareness side of things is important because, majority of time, I think people were like me, where it's like they just assume that it's all tied to diet. You eat bad, don't exercise, drink, smoke,
Yes.
you're going to get it. And that's not the case.
No, it's not. And that was one of the first questions I asked the endocrinologist that treated my son, when he was first diagnosed. Is I'm like, is there anything that we did as a family that we should have done differently? And he was, his like immediate answer was like, there's nothing you could have done to prevent this. And
Wow.
there are some types of diabetes, which are, type 2 diabetes, for example. That's the one that's typically known as sort of adult onset diabetes. And there are ways that you can sort of reverse that.
Got it.
But with the type 1, which is what my son has, which used to be called juvenile diabetes, there is no cure, there is no reversing it. So yes, you're right. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of just not knowing out there, and it's great that the ADA, or the American Diabetes Association, is putting some resources into teaching people about it.
No, thank you for sharing that. Like I said, so I learned something new.
Sure.
So the last question I have for you is, when people watch this, what can people in equipment finance do, Todd, to help make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, so that's a great question. Obviously, donations are appreciated. The American Diabetes Association, I think, does a great job of investing in things that have an impact on people living with diabetes. And sometimes that just takes financial resources to do. So donations are a great way to support that. But even beyond that, I think if people really knew of their coworkers, their friends, their family around them, I think they'd be surprised to probably know exactly how many people are living with diabetes. It's a disease that's growing in our country. And so I think the other thing is bringing education into your families, into your workplaces about this, because you may have coworkers that are living with diabetes that need it.
Yeah.
Or it may help people who don't have diabetes, who are working, or who are with people with diabetes, understand. And so I think doing things to bring in education, contacting the American Diabetes Association, getting information that they've got, and bringing that in, and sort of creating that advocacy and creating that environment of that creating an environment that people are more informed about this. And per your comment a little bit a few minutes ago about type 2 diabetes, which I mentioned, that is the one that I think there is a lot of talk about tying it to diet and to,
Right.
maybe habits and, I think people knowing that, that might prevent people from developing.
Yeah.
I almost said the word contracting, but it's not something you contract. So,
Right.
but it is something you can develop. So I think just again, raising awareness, raising education, utilizing the resources of the American Diabetes Association to do good in your own circle is something that people can do.
Excellent, Todd. Well, thank you again for joining me today and for talking about the Tour to Cure. Look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully over the next few months, man.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Yep, you as well.